No matter how brilliant and beautiful a game may be, over time it becomes outdated. While the game itself does not change, the gaming industry and its norms do. What was once acceptable in terms of gameplay or mechanics many years ago may now be perceived as outdated or poor game design. In this video I want to talk about how we have so many remakes lately and why it shouldn't be considered as something bad. Consider the era of the PlayStation 1, where a fixed camera was a necessity due to the technological limitations of the time. Games were designed around these constraints, and players accepted them as a part of the experience. However, nowadays you won't see fixed cameras pretty much anywhere except in some nostalgic indie games that try to replicate gameplay and atmosphere of that era. Legendary franchises like Resident Evil and Silent Hill have utilized fixed cameras in their early installments, so it's no wonder that these games are now getting remakes. Unskippable cutscenes were considered the norm at the turn of the century. However, in today's fast-paced gaming culture, where players value flexibility and replayability, games that lack the option to skip cutscenes may hinder enjoyment and engagement of the audience. God of War Ragnarok is a fantastic game, but I wouldn't replay it again precisely because of the unskippable cutscenes. Though the game's predecessor eventually received a patch that allowed skipping cutscenes, so it's possible that Ragnarok will receive a similar update in the future. It's especially disappointing when you have to watch a cutscene repeatedly during the fight with the boss you keep dying against. One of the most infamous examples is an animation of the supernova skill in Final Fantasy VII that lasts 2 whole minutes. Imagine if you had to watch the transition cutscene every time you face Malenia in Elden Ring without an option to skip it. It's certainly a wonderful cutscene, but rewatching it over and over again becomes just too much.
You will witness true horror.
About 20 years ago, quick-time events gained popularity and were featured in numerous 7th generation games, requiring players to rapidly and precisely press buttons on their controllers to progress through cinematic sequences. However, as gaming has evolved, QTEs gradually became less prevalent in modern titles. While they can still be found in certain modern games, quick-time events have transitioned from being a common gameplay mechanic to more of an exception rather than the rule. Automatic saves have become a standard feature in almost every game released today, marking a significant shift from the past when they were quite a rarity. In the past, manual saves were essential, often limited to specific checkpoints or save points within the game world. The absence of automatic saves meant that any mistake or unexpected interruptions could result in the loss of a significant amount of progress, leaving players frustrated and demoralized. While losing your progress is fine for hardcore games or roguelikes where the challenge lies in repeated attempts and learning from mistakes, in regular games, losing a significant amount of progress can feel like too big of a price for a simple error. And of course, graphics suffer the most over time. While recent years may have seen more subtle improvements, and even a 7-year-old game like Uncharted 4 still looks like a game that could be released today, the transition from the 5th to the 7th generation of consoles brought monumental changes in graphical fidelity. The standard resolution shifted to 1080p, and the aspect ratio transformed to 16:9. The visual leap between these generations was staggering, causing a wave of HD remasters where older games received enhancements in resolution and improved texture quality. The difference between a remake and a remaster can sometimes be straightforward, but in certain cases it becomes more nuanced. Typically, a remaster involves graphical enhancements and quality of life updates while preserving the main gameplay aspects and overall style of the original game. On the other hand, a remake involves significant changes to gameplay elements, mechanics, and even the artistic style and story, resulting in a reimagined version of the original game. but sometimes it's not as easy as that. While there are some obvious examples of a remake like Resident Evil 2, 3 and 4, Yakuza Kiwami or Final Fantasy VII Remake, what about the last year's Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion? While it is positioned as a remaster, the extent of the changes made to the game is substantial, leading some to call it a remake. The Reunion version includes updated graphics, new 3D models for objects, a newly arranged soundtrack, voice acting for all dialogues, and major alterations to the combat system. Only the story and overall design remain unchanged, and while it still retains a similar feel to the original, it can be argued that it goes beyond a traditional remaster, offering more than just a graphical upgrade. So, when does remaster end and remake begin? Well, ultimately it doesn't matter. The important factor is the overall quality of the game itself. I've seen many discussions on whether 2020's Demon's Souls should be classified as a remake or a remaster. After all, it uses parts of the original code and feels very close to the original game, even with a multitude of improvements. Well, the important part is that the game is good. The label assigned to a game, whether it's a remake or a remaster, may have marketing implications, but it doesn't alter the essence of the game. Remakes are created for several compelling reasons, with the most obvious one being the money. From a business standpoint, releasing a game based on a well-known franchise is generally considered safer than launching a new IP, particularly for single-player games. While the classification of a game as an original, a sequel, or a remake does not impact its quality, it does have a significant influence on its sales, especially during the pre-order phase. Remakes of legendary classic games, which have built a devoted fanbase over the years, often generate immense hype and anticipation leading up to their release. Consequently, even if a remake falls short of expectations in terms of its overall quality, its association with a beloved game can still drive substantial sales. Of course, not every game is suitable to be remade. The decision to create a remake typically aligns with the current popularity of the franchise and the presence of a must-play reputation for the game. If it has achieved iconic status but has not aged well in terms of graphics or gameplay mechanics, creating a remake becomes a logical choice. Take for instance Resident Evil 4, which recently got a remake. The original game is widely regarded as one of the greatest games ever made, but it suffers from certain issues like outdated visuals and gameplay mechanics such as the need to access the inventory every time you need to swap weapons or inability to shoot while walking. These gameplay specifics does not make the game worse, but they may repel newer players who are accustomed to the modern game design. So overall, a good remake should keep a balance between honoring the essence of the original for longtime fans and delivering a modern experience for newcomers. So, is it a good or a bad thing that we have so many remakes lately? Well, it ultimately doesn't matter at all. What truly matters is the game itself and the experience it offers to players. No one is forcing you to play a remake, and the original versions of games remain available for those who prefer them. As a player, you have the freedom to choose what you want to play. Whether a game is a remake or an entirely original creation, the key factor is that it brings enjoyment to the player. It's about fun, it's about emotions, it's about what you feel when you play the game.